Okay. All right.
Sure.
All right. So Colleen gave me a little bit of insight into where you guys are at. How can I be most helpful?
I think
Go ahead. Go ahead. I was just going to share the screen so she can see our question.
Perfect.
great.
I think I can do that. Can I do that?
Yeah.
Am I doing it? Okay.
You're doing it.
It all
Good,
just went
Colleen.
all over the place. So I was like, oh,
This is awesome.
okay. Thank you. Go ahead,
Good.
Katrina.
I don't want
Yeah,
to
go ahead.
speak for everyone, but I know Chris doesn't want to speak for everyone, so I'll give it a go. I think that basically where we are right now is we're feeling pretty passionate about what is success and sort of defining and redefining our colonial version of what we consider success right now, and we're hoping that we're going deep enough. I think is where our yeah, but we're also feeling really passionate about it. So
I love it. What's not feeling deep enough to you, if I were to quote you back? Or what do you worry about feeling like might be too superficial?
maybe somebody else could answer that question. No?
I was
Okay.
thinking it was more along the lines that our question is about us. So it's how can the use of street data transform our understanding of success for Indigenous students? We're sort of seeing that, and is that really the intention of what we're supposed to be doing? Is looking more closely at the data so that, and this could be the first question we have, is that it's helping us better understand what is success for students, and then where do we need to go? Like, what are we missing? Because we know we're missing the street data piece. We gather a lot of data, but we are starting to see a downward trend over the last few years of our completion rates. There has been a decrease for our Indigenous students. When I look at our Indigenous graduation rates, there's definitely a very marginalized group that shows up. However, I'm just not sure that whether it's too specific or we need to start here. I'm not sure.
Okay, I have some thoughts, but I did want to clarify what the H designation is, which you messaged me about. What did you mean by Indigenous students with an H designation?
H are behavior students.
Okay, sorry, it's different in.
I thought you said age, so I'm like, age designation.
Okay, so you could have.
That's me, 55 plus, right?
I mean, that's all good. I'm not asking your age, but yeah, okay. So behavioral, so Indigenous students with a behavior designation could be like a more narrow. Do you feel called to focus in that way? Like to shift your question so it's that narrow, or do you want to more broadly understand?
That's what I'm wondering, because I mean, I was in a data, we meet for our Indigenous students every month. So all three high schools and our middle school. And there's more and more substance abuse issues, more eloping from school at an earlier age. Those are all things that really resonate, like are quite high on my area, like missing an education from an earlier point of view.
Mhm.
Of those students, though, that I think that are they're at school, tend to be our H students, or our students with behavior. They're just not engaging when they're at school. So I'm just wondering if there's each of our communities is very different, because we have 3 cities, right? We have 3 cities in our school district, and each has a very different thing too. So I'm wondering if it's too broad, and can we get to what we need to get to, because we do have 3 very different communities.
Yeah.
Or do we need to start here and really unpack this for ourselves?
Okay, let me throw a couple things out and then just see what sticks. And you always take what you want and leave the rest. So one thing is, like, when I close my eyes and I imagine where this could lead, what I see is in Reimagine this like beautiful opportunity to reimagine what success looks like with whoever you listen to in phase 1. Like to really do some design sessions together with the learners, or maybe the caregivers and the learners. I don't know how, if you want to include parents and families. That feels really exciting and promising. And that wouldn't happen right until probably April, but I love that image for you all. It makes me think of a video clip that I'm putting in the chat for you. You don't need to get distracted by it now, but this is from episode 7 of Street Data Pod, where I interviewed Kevin Godden and Perry Smith, who used to work for Abbotsford. And Perry is an Indigenous leader you might know there. And he's talking in this clip about exactly this, what you guys are up to, like how we define success and how it's often very colonial and not inclusive of what that means for different families and particularly Indigenous communities. So I think this is a very important thing to study and learn about together. And I could see it leading to a place of radical dreaming for you with the community. As far as the question itself, I don't have an answer to the question of whether to narrow, but I think it might feel more manageable to start with, to say we're going to start our listening with the students with the age designation, particularly if those are the kids you're most concerned about or who are most at the margins, is like the intersection of behavior issues and Indigenous students. And I would be probably in favor of starting there just to make it a little bit more tight. And then that doesn't mean you can't listen to other students later, but it's like just how to focus early on. And my only thought on the question is, maybe, I don't know if this is right, but like maybe considering a gentle rewarding to something like, how could we reimagine what success looks like, or reimagine our framework for success in collaboration with this group of students we're listening to? So that you're kind of pointing yourselves toward the radical dreaming part of the process early on. And thinking about the role of sharing power with folks who've lacked power in the system.
What I appreciate about that, Shane, is when we're sharing this, because I think it would be important to obviously share the inquiry with the folks we're going to be speaking with, and I appreciate that notion of that gentle invitation, because it's a lot friendlier than now we're at the word success and it's on its own, and it may be a little more jarring.
Lizzie. Oh, sorry.
Cam is house sitting a puppy as we speak.
Oh, no worries.
My mom came in with my child and left me with her puppy.
Oh no. Okay, so it sounds like, at least for some of you, the we resonates. It feels a little more inclusive. One caution I would put out there before I go is, I think the rewording that's here could feel like, for families, like, oh, you're trying to have a lower bar for success for our kids.
Right.
Oh, I see where this is going, right? Like that could produce some natural skepticism. So how could we reimagine our framework for success? This is how I'm thinking about it, in partnership with or in collaboration with Indigenous students and families. It's not so much how do we change what success means just for this population, because honestly, the learning you do should affect the whole system. Right? It's like, this is the idea of listening at the margins. What Ari told me in that interview, it should not only touch trans and non-binary students, it should help all the students who feel at the margins. So I don't know if you can hear that slight shift, but it's like, how do we reimagine what success looks like in collaboration with Indigenous students and families, or just students? And then ultimately that becomes something that changes everything, even though we're starting somewhere small. That makes sense, you guys?
Yeah, I think I appreciate that. Again, I think we need to learn more. How do we honor, again, the cultural knowledge, experience, etc., that our students are already bringing, that are engaging in, outside of the narrow box of what we provide during the 9 to 3 school day. And if they don't hit those boxes, we're not honoring that, and therefore they're missing the credit in X. When, oh my goodness, here's what they're already doing, and even more so, for me, it's again how to more fully integrate Indigenous ways of knowing and doing for everyone in curriculum, so that there's that engagement, attachment piece, etc. And it's been something our district's worked on long before I got here, and we sort of reached this crest, and now we seem to be falling back down. And as we said, we recently we noticed a 20% gap,
right,
for graduation rates, and that's super concerning to all of us, and we know it's not a grad program problem, it's a K-12 problem. So we're really hoping to uncover some good truths here to apply to moving
Mhm.
forward.
Beautiful. How does that adjustment feel to you guys as a team?
I think
Good.
it's, yeah, I think it's going to give us that ability to be, to reimagine, like you were saying, but also really get at those truths a
Mhm.
little bit more closely as to what I feel a little bit more comfortable with that.
Fantastic. Yeah.
I don't know if
Katrina, I
everyone
think
else
you-
does too.
I think I
know
heard
Katrina
Katrina
said yes.
endorse.
Katrina
I
was
did,
good.
yes, thank
Okay.
you.
Thanks,
Awesome.
Katrina.
All right, I'm going to leave you guys
Pam,
to
thank you.
it. And yeah, do you feel good?
Okay.
Everybody,
I
Kim,
think
you
we
too?
got consensus. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Beautiful. I hope that was helpful. I'm really honored to get to spend time with you guys.
Oh,
my God.
yeah. So yeah.
Hi, friends.
Hey.
Talk to me.
Yeah, there's just a few of us. I'll just run you past. So yeah, interesting. So I'll just give you a quick overview of how we got to where we're at. What we noticed, and so we started our work with we wanted to connect this work to work that the schools are already doing. Teachers last year definitely were complaining about attendance. Schools kind of flipped the narrative to, okay, how can we work on engaging our schools? And that's why this community practice was a natural fit to focus and support that work rather than be a separate piece. So we started looking really at, and then when Katie and I wrote the proposal, we definitely had Indigenous students in mind, having conversations with them. And then as we started looking at attendance data, we were able to actually pull our sort of students who attend the least at both the high schools, and with the alternate school here being able to provide 5 of their most concerning students. And then so I did that yesterday, last week, and it was really super interesting because at one of our high schools, 50% of those students were Indigenous. At the other high school, almost 75% of those kids had IEPs. Overriding too is so our conversation's kind of going like, so when we're identifying the margin, we're going, do we just do Indigenous students? And what you said today really spoke to that. However, we have this underlying thing about mental health and students' ability to come to school. We think that you'll say just focus on Indigenous students, and then that can apply to all the rest of the groups that you're concerned about. But we have this like deep feeling about just talking to those kids that aren't coming to school. There you go, in a nutshell.
Okay. But if I heard you correctly, you're saying the kids who aren't coming to school are at one site 50% Indigenous students, at the other site 75% students with IEP. So there's intersectionality between Indigenous identity, IEPs, and attendance. Yes.
Yeah, we're actually saying like our attendance list has all the groups that the margins that we're concerned about.
Right.
And we're okay to just go with that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's like a right answer. It's partly about capacity and how many young people you feel like you can spend time with. That could help to narrow. Like, we can sit down with 10 and there's 10 that represents this intersectional demographic. That might be a natural fit. You could also think about it in terms of urgency, like where is the most pain in the system and the most invisibility, or like where do you feel like you understand the least about student experiences?
Right.
Do either of those questions lean you toward a direction?
I mean, the least would be our Indigenous, especially our two nations. Like it's interesting how that data showed at the one school where there is high levels of Indigenous students, or high absentee rate, that that nation does send their kids to our school, where the other nation typically doesn't send their kids to our schools.
They go to Nanaimo.
Yeah. And so that's something to look at. So yeah,
That sounds like really interesting, to lean in on as an inquiry.
Yeah. I mean, we definitely want to have conversations with both our local nations to ask them also these questions that we're going to come up with.
So if you were going to focus on the intersection between Indigenous learners who are chronically absent, it sounds like,
Yeah.
what would be the question you would ask?
I guess we have lots of questions, but
Or like what
yeah.
maybe a different way to say it is like, what are you trying to learn about that what's underneath that pattern?
I mean, in some cases, we want to know, why aren't you coming to school?
What can we do better?
Yeah, so what can we do better to make, I mean, cultural safety is what we're getting at, but thinking about student-friendly questions that would get us to that.
Okay, so an inquiry question might be, just spitballing it for a second, like, what about our current system and practices are contributing to this pattern of high absenteeism among Indigenous learners? That's one way you could frame it. Another way that comes to mind is, it's maybe jumping the gun, would be something like, how could we create a culture, how could we sort of increase cultural safety through listening and building with our Indigenous learners? Something like that, that moves you more toward reimagine. I don't know if either of those directions feels promising to you, but just throwing out some ideas.
My and I'm sitting with Katie and Sarah here, who are on our Indigenous ed team, and I also obviously navigating a community that's big. I feel like we're like, if they were all in the room, not that we were going down the path of just focusing on Indigenous students, and we went away from that. We've always kept Indigenous students in mind,
because they show up.
Yeah.
Any question that we ask.
Yeah,
around
they're
belonging in
a
schools.
large part of that, and that's why yeah, I'm fine just doing that, but I don't feel it represents where our community practice wants to necessarily focus on. I guess that's our struggle.
What's the disconnect there?
I don't know. Mental health has come up. I've definitely gone, okay, are we avoiding Indigenous students because of our system and our systemic racism? Do we not want to know the answer to those questions? And I don't think so. I don't believe so. What do you think?
Sarah, do you know?
I don't think so. So part of when I'm in the worst chair. Hi. So the conversation, like, I'm new to the team. I just joined in January, but something that I brought forward was, in this specific frame of this question, my concern was that if we were only focusing on our Indigenous learners, there's also building that preconceived notion that Indigenous learners are the non-attenders, because when I joined, the group was saying non-attenders, and then Indigenous was the identifier, like the cultural identifier within that. And it brings me to like Dr. Dustin Louie's work, where he's like, you're choosing that data for a reason. You're choosing that because there's that preconceived notion that it's the Indigenous students who are not attending. And so my wonder, I guess, was that if we want, like, I feel very passionately that our Indigenous voices need to be heard and they need to be explored as a part of, but I want to also be able to compare that information to the information provided from other groups within that non-attendee list. Like, do we have Sochi kids within that list? Do we have kids that are below the poverty line? Like, how are we recognized? And again, that intersectionality is going to naturally present in many of those cases as well.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, I'm thinking about what you said right now. Well, I think partly it comes down to what's the motivation for identifying the group, or what's the like gestalt of it. So if you came at it like, what's the problem with our Indigenous students that they're not coming to school, then I think that exacerbates what Dr. Louis is talking about. It's like reinforcing an implicit bias. But if the inquiry is like, what can we learn from listening deeply to our Indigenous students about how to increase cultural safety in our schools, that's an orientation toward cultural wealth and abundance that actually can change the whole system if you listen through that lens, right? So that's one thing, is like how we frame the question obviously really matters. That's why we spend so much time on that today, and just really thinking about how do we frame it in not in a deficit mindset, but in an abundance. The other piece about comparing groups of students, I think if you have capacity to do that, to listen to two groups of students, and you have two distinct groups of students at the margins that might have different reasons they're not coming to school, that could be its own really interesting inquiry, right? Which is could be something. How do we understand the root causes of absenteeism for this group of kiddos and this group of kiddos? And how can that change how can we change our system in response to that?
We do have that, and we have looked at that, and there is overlap on those two groups as well.
Mental health
Yeah.
and Indigenous students.
Yeah. But you mentioned earlier from the satellite data, it sounded like students with IEPs was the next highest group after Indigenous students.
Yeah, but we were able to drill down to actual mental health designations. Behavioral mental health category H, yeah.
Well, there you go. Yeah. So maybe that's the answer is,
Yeah.
what are the lived experiences, or like, what are the experiences of Indigenous learners and students with the mental health designation that's causing them to not want to be at school, and how do we transform that, or something like that?
Yeah, okay.
Does that feel right?
It does a lot, yeah. And I know the rest of our group would feel more comfortable with that.
I appreciate the wrestling you guys are doing and the depth of thinking, because it's not an easy, like, arriving at the question can be the hardest part of the whole process. But once you get it and you're really invested in it, I feel like it's going to take you to some really amazing places.
Agreed. That's why we didn't want to just pick. And we've been talking, I don't know how many times we've met and we've looked at, so we have really interesting data and insight where you can punch in all these different things and these different numbers will come out, right? And then digging into those, it was just fascinating. Narrowing and then going, wait a minute, did we narrow too much? And then going back out again. And but I mean, that's the work, right? Is yeah.
Ooh, yeah. I'm excited for you guys. Well, you know how to find me. Katie's got a direct line, so hit me up anytime. I hope this is helpful to talk a little bit.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.